Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition, and today we are going to talk about change and the story we have around failure and change, and how a lot of times when things change, we depict that as a failure. So I want to dive a little bit into that, and we can start looking at why. So why do we not like change? Now I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback from that statement because every time in my human existence, I will say, I am not a change person. I was born under the sign of Taurus. We're not change people. We don't like moving around a lot. We don't like a lot of stuff to go awry. We like pretty consistent things, and we are not ones that really like a lot of upheaval. That's just not, just not how we were programmed, right? That's not the programming of that's not the astrology I came in under. So now I've talked a lot about astrology before and how, once you go through certain stages of your ascension process, your sign sort of gets cleaned up, right? In a sense, and all the distortions of that sign, which for a Taurus, they'd say stubbornness is one. It can be, it starts to, you kind of lose the distorted ones in a sense, or they get shifted to where they're now very important parts of your journey, right? You need those traits to get through your ascension process. You need to pull on those traits. You even, no matter whether you're in your human template or your soul template, it plays a very important part. Same thing with everything we do as a human in our human existence. All those traits come in later when we're starting to design our soul lives. We need those things. We didn't just waste our time. So from a human perspective, I was never big on change. Now, take that to getting into our soul line realities, right? And we start to look at when things change, and there's a lot of fear around change, right? So we have to kind of work through all the fear. I just posted a video on fear. So I'm not going to get too much into that here. I want to keep this one kind of focused on the story we have around change. And in our human existence, anytime something changed, we would call it a failure. I see that so many times on different clickbait, for videos. They'll call something a failure, this a failure, that a failure. Because it didn't go, what does that mean? Why is every time something changes, it's a failure? Like if you're married and then not married, well, that's a failed marriage? If you start a business and it didn't work, well, that's a failed attempt. Anytime it didn't go the way we thought our human wanted it to go, we put the F on it, we make it as a failure. And it's important to really start to dive into why we think that. What template are we measuring it by? When we're in our human realities, we measure it by a human template. If it didn't go the way we wanted it to go, which normally meant either love, money, or fame and success, then we would consider it did not work, because those are sort of the kind of what we're all striving for, right? Striving to find that true love, or striving to find money, fame, success. That's it. You can pretty much boil everything down in our human existence as to we did it from one of those things. There's not a lot of nuance to our human existence. There's no purity in why we do something. It's got a motive to it. No matter how pure we think we are in something, the deeper we dig, we're gonna find out that it is distorted as hell, and it was agenda all over it. But what you're gonna find is you start to carry over a lot of that. Even when we start moving out of our human realities into our soul line realities, if it doesn't go the way we think it's supposed to go, we start saying it was a failure. And you also hear other people around you starting to label things as that. So many things I have done as my soul aligned journey, as my soul aligned, some people say what I agreed to do. Some people might call it, this is what the work I decided to do. Would say, well, that looks like a failure. You're right. It doesn't, all the stuff you've done, all the changes you've had to make, that doesn't look like that would be successful. Because it's still being judged by a human frame. It's still being judged by a human existence. It's not being judged by anything beyond that. So as we continue to go through our journey, as we continue to really start to evaluate different parts in our lives, different shifts. I mean, normally the biggest shifts are not the big life changes we remember, especially in our human existence. In our human existence, it's the small moments. that were the biggest impacts. But we didn't know that at the time. You only see those pivotal, you can start to piece the realities together when you look back on them. You have a higher consciousness now than you did 10 years ago. You look back on different realities, you piece them together differently. You understand why that was it was important I met that person at that moment, because that was going to set up a reality 4 years later. But at the time, I didn't correlate that. I didn't see that. I didn't understand that because we didn't have the consciousness to comprehend it. When we start getting into our more ascended states, when we start embodying in more of our soul consciousness, when we start looking at things through a different lens without the distortions around it, we really can start to understand all the things we did and why they were pivotal, why they were important. And what we did see as a failure is now we can look back on and see, well, that was very successful. And when we get into more of our soul aligned realities, there are bigger shifts and bigger changes, and they are pretty monumental a lot of times of what we have to do, because we have to kind of distance ourselves from the human realities. Well, try doing that when billions of people still live in human realities. There are a lot of human systems set up that we can't participate in anymore. So we have to try to find different ways to do things. We have to do things the harder way. I can't do things certain ways because it's aligned with the human system. So there's some things I can't do. I can't. A lot of people talk about marketing. Marketing is a very human thing. We can't market in the same way. We can't promise things. I see so many people where they promise this, promise that. We can't do that. We can't promise things because that's getting into very distorted timelines. We start promising people are going to achieve certain things. So we have to do things differently. So it gets challenging. We have to really be able to pull on everything we ever had, everything we ever did, to be able to get to certain places, certain markers we're supposed to hit, certain places we're supposed to be, certain people we're supposed to talk to. We realize everything we're doing is part of our journey. It's not just for me, it's not just putting out streams and videos and doing sessions and doing courses. That's a part, but there's just the general things we do every day, how we show up for people, how we show up in our realities. It's not just the public stuff. It's all of it. It's living it all the time, and looking at how things have changed, and looking at the different ways we would equate that. And if we're still looking at anything that shifted, anything that didn't work out as a failure, we're still looking at it through a human lens, because there's no such thing. It was aligned until it wasn't. It served a purpose till it didn't. It was there to support us till it wasn't. That's it. There's nothing beyond that. There's no other story there. Anything else we put on that is our story. And it's a story that's not feeding anything productive. It's just feeding us getting into a victim mentality on the whole thing. I see so many, even in, higher consciousness realities, so that what people are trying to build, they'll still kind of get stuck in that. And I'll even find myself doing it. So I'll see other people doing it, which always makes me look at myself, because when stuff shows up in your reality, when it shows up in my universe, it's showing me something about myself. And I'll still see certain things I'll do and say, oh, that was a fail. And I'll catch myself saying it. I'm like, well, no, that's how it was supposed to be. The only thing I will say is, when we look at something as a fail, change that word out to say, was that a conscious act or was that an unconscious act? That's how we're going to learn. That's how we're going to really start to reprogram. And was I conscious there? Or was I really looking at every aspect I could see? Was I trying to be from my highest aspect? Did I go back into my human aspect? Was I unconscious there? That's more important. And you're going to find out when you're really judging it, because failure is just judgment. It's just a fancy way to say judgment. That's all that is, It's a different word for judging something. Judging how, because you didn't like the outcome. Our human didn't like the outcome, so we're going to have to judge how that came out. Knowing that it came out how it was supposed to come out in that timeline. How I started it was how I was going to end it. The energy of which that timeline started was the energy of which that timeline was going to end. And if it wasn't started in its purest place, it wasn't going to end there. It's no point. It's not going to be shifted in the middle. We can either shift out of the timeline and go to a different one, but trying to rearrange a timeline that was set up under a certain energetic principle, that was the foundation, you can't shift it in the middle. You can realign to something higher. You can't realign this one, because the minute you start realigning it, you're shifting the frequencies of it. Some people won't hold in that frequency. So the whole thing changes, which means it's not the same timeline anymore. So when we're looking at, did it work? Did it not work? What did I get out of that? That's another one you'll see people saying, or I didn't get anything from me. Nothing from me came out of that. You also start to see that your importance of in the whole, and in the sense it's not just about us anymore. In our human existence, we make it feel like it's maybe about everybody else when it's all about us. Even if we don't want judgment from others, so we try to overcompensate on certain things because we don't want that judgment because it's all about us. It's always about us. In the human reality, it's always going to come back down to, it's always about us. How I feel about myself, how I did that, what happened there. It's always about us. That's it. There's nobody else in that equation, okay? And when we're in those parts, we are technically not conscious. So when we're evaluating something, don't look at what your evaluation is. What part of me is evaluating that? Is my unconscious part evaluating that and saying, oh, that was not great? I didn't show up the best there, or yeah, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to come out. But let's look at what did come out of it. You can't actually fail at anything. Everything had a purpose. It just wasn't the purpose we thought, and it didn't. If it doesn't achieve in the beginning for us, and this is a long program to go and to really break through. If it doesn't meet the 4 criteria, we are going to sit there and weigh that as it didn't work out. Or another thing I'll see is when a change happens, everyone thinks that, oh, this is the biggest thing ever, and everything's going to change now because this one event. I saw someone say that the other day, and I'm like, boy, they're going to be very disappointed when they realize that is one small step in a reality they might be trying to create, and I don't think they're creating it. They might not see the whole reality they're trying to create right now. But just thinking, oh, that one thing. It's not one thing. It's a zillion things you're going to do. And usually the most things that in our human reality would feel the most important, normally they're not the ones that move the wheel. They're not the ones that really shift anything over. It's the smaller things we do. When we're looking at that one big thing, that, oh, that's going to do it, and it doesn't do it. And I know I was in that situation where I was looking at this one big event. I'm like, that's going to be the thing that's going to shift this whole thing for me. And it didn't work out. And I was very disappointed in that. And I had to really work through that because I put all those expectations around that reality about that one event. And when it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to pan out, because it didn't feel, one of the 4, was it money, fame, success? What's the other one? Love. And not our self-love, not a pure love, but that human love, the cords of attachment kind of love, that needing that acceptance kind of love. So I do want to clarify that for a second. It's different. Human love and soul love, they're different. They're not the same. It's the Cinderella love story, and then there's the soul aligned, the love stories there, and those relationships and those conscious partnerships we build that are not, the twin flame or the soulmate kind of distortions we can get into. So I know I was very disappointed, and I had to really look at that. I had to really break that down, and I felt I blamed the other person, because why aren't you doing what I want you to do? When we start saying that, why is this not working? Why are you not doing what I want you to do? They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're following the script, whether you just don't have a copy of it. They're following their script to show you what they're supposed to show you. You don't get the script in advance. They're doing their thing. You're the one that's trying to go off script. I'm the one that's trying to go off script and turn this reality into a different outcome, because this is not the outcome I want. So I want to say this failed. It didn't fail. It's just the outcome was the outcome. It just was not the one I wanted from a human perspective, So look at what you label as that. Look at what you say is that, and look at how you feel about yourself when you call it that. And then twist it around to see, what else can I see in this? What else could this be? Why else was I here? There's a zillion reasons you were here, and it's not one of them to do with the 4 human reasons we do anything. Okay. Keep practicing the art of intuition.